I couldn't keep living the way that I had been living. And so one morning, I wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'm trying to write my brother like this "How to Not Screw Up Your Life" letter, and eventually I decide I'm done lying to people. I'm done having to tell people that I'm doing one thing and then go and do another. And so I call my parents at like 4:30 in the morning, just let them know everything that's going on. Right? I've been doing drugs. We got this grow in the basement, and I just want to be honest with you. And I'm thinking they're going to be like, oh, thanks for telling us, right? But they kind of freaked out a little bit. They're afraid I'm going to get thrown in jail. And so they asked me to come home, and I drove home that morning, went back to my hometown. I grabbed one thing from my parents' house, and it was a Bible. Some lady had given me this Bible when I was in junior high school, and I had tried to read it a couple times growing up, but I never really got very far. I get to like Genesis chapter 10, and all of a sudden there's this list of this guy begat this guy, and all it's genealogies, right? It's who was born from whom, and I just always got bored with that and would put it down. So I'm 21 years old at the time. I just got done flunking out of my third year of college, sort of didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I wasn't that into school. Sort of lost my sense of purpose, I think. I was looking for something that was going to make me happy and just trying to find a career path that was going to be fulfilling. Wasn't really finding that, and so I kind of just gave up for a while. I started doing drugs. I started actually growing drugs in our basement. I was a little bit of a moron. Like one day I climbed up on the top of this courthouse and tried to steal a grow light and was trying to get dirt from Walmart. I had kind of a scheme worked out where I could put stuff in the cart and then act like I was going in to pay for it, not pay for it. I had become a thief. I had become a liar. I had a whole bunch of kids I was coaching swimming for, about 200 kids and their families. They looked up to me. They thought I was a role model for them, and I was really deceiving them about who I was. And there came a point in my life during that time where I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and feel good about who I was. Like I would think about the way that I would maybe treat somebody or the way that I was lying to my family, and I just think, man, if somebody was doing that to me and treating me in that way, I wouldn't like them. And God just started to convict me a little bit about what was going on in my life and who I had become as a person. There was just this background knowledge from growing up in a family that didn't go to church and didn't really know God, but who taught me right from wrong. And there was things I knew were not right. And lying to people who deserve honesty from you was one of them. And I started to realize that I was a sinner. My parents took this trip to Hawaii, and I got to come along. It was the first time that I had been sober in, several months. The only days that I hadn't been high on something. And my mom wanted to go to church, and so we said, okay. It was Easter. We didn't do that very often, but she was wanting to do that, and so we tagged along. There's this kid stands up in the service and just sings this song. He was a high school aged guy and just pours his heart out to the Lord. And I remember feeling the presence of God in that space. I remember just seeing a unfakeable, passionate love for God. It was something that was real. It was something that was powerful that was in this kid who was singing. And I just went, man, I can't keep pretending that God's not real anymore. I can't keep living and acting like I don't believe that He exists. And so I came back to the town I was going to school in. I tried to keep coaching swimming, but I couldn't keep living the way that I had been living. And so one morning, I wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'm trying to write my brother like this "How to Not Screw Up Your Life" letter. And eventually I decide I'm done lying to people. I'm done having to tell people that I'm doing one thing and then go and do another. And so I call my parents at like 4:30 in the morning, just let them know everything that's going on, right? I've been doing drugs. We got this grow in the basement, and I just want to be honest with you. And I'm thinking they're going to be like, oh, thanks for telling us, right? But they kind of freaked out a little bit. They're afraid I'm going to get thrown in jail. And so they asked me to come home, and I drove home that morning, went back to my hometown. I grabbed one thing from my parents' house, and it was a Bible. Some lady had given me this Bible when I was in junior high school, and I had tried to read it a couple times growing up, but I never really got very far. I get to like Genesis chapter 10, and all of a sudden there's this list of this guy begat this guy, and all it's genealogies, right? It's who was born from whom, and I just always got bored with that and would put it down. And so I decided when I picked up the Bible again, here I'm 21 years old, I thought I'd just skip a couple books, and I went to this book called Leviticus. If you've ever read Leviticus, you might get a giggle out of that. It's just this book of law after law after law. It's kind of hard to understand. It can be confusing. I mean, it's got laws in there from God to His people about like what to eat, what not to eat, what to touch, what not to touch. And there's a lot of things in there that I didn't understand. Okay, but there's one thing that just jumps off the pages of Leviticus, and it's the message that God is perfectly without sin. He's holy. And that anything that has any amount of sin, anything that's unclean, is not fit to be in His presence. And I'm reading through this book. I get to like chapter 15, and there's this sentence that just kind of blew me away. Right? It's God saying, keep the people of Israel away from their uncleanness, so that they do not die when they defile my tabernacle that's among them. God's presence had come to be with Israel, and if they were going to have the presence of God among them and not die because of their sin, they needed to keep on making the sacrifices. They needed to stay clean in the eyes of God. And I'm reading that, and I'm just like, man, I am in big trouble if I get what I deserve from my sin. And I sat in my parents' basement after the summer swim coach job was over. I just read and read and read through the Old Testament. And that message just kept jumping off the pages at me. Man, I do not want to get what I deserve for my sin from God. I knew I was a sinner. I knew I needed forgiveness. I didn't really understand the truth about Jesus, and so I kept reading, right? I read all the way to the book of Luke before I really absolutely understood what Jesus did for me. So Old Testament, I figured out I didn't want to get what I deserved. New Testament, I met Jesus. And I found out that He took for me what I deserved for my sin so that I wouldn't have to. And if you've kind of lived for a while pursuing sin, you have this just general feeling in you that maybe you're just not good enough for God. Maybe God's for those other people. Maybe He doesn't really want you. And I had that, right? I was thinking, okay, this is cool, this Jesus thing. He's kind of awesome, but I don't really know if what He's done is good enough for me. And I got to Luke chapter 23, verse 34. He's hanging on a cross. He's been spit on, He's been beaten, He's been laughed at, punched in the face, He's been nailed to a cross. And He is looking down on these people who put Him there and who are in the process of like dividing up His last belongings right in front of Him. It's just like spitting in His face, right? Like, well, we don't really care about you up on the cross, but we'll take your clothes, okay? And He looks down at these people who put the nails in His hands. And He says, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. And I read those words for the first time, and I just bawled for like 3 hours. I could not stop feeling overwhelmed by the crazy love of God for people, right? That is just so not like me, all right? If you nailed me up on a cross, I'm not going to be the guy who's up there going, hey, would you just forgive those people, Lord? Would you just not kill them right now? Give them a chance to benefit from what I'm doing. I want them with me. I want them to be saved. That's not human, guys. That's not natural to have that kind of a heart for people who have beaten and persecuted and just hated you. And I saw in Jesus, in those words, that He was just this incredible, infinitely loving, crazy, beautiful God. That I did not deserve to be with Him. but that he loved me anyway. I saw the difference between me and him and just my sinfulness, and the fact that he wanted me anyway. It just blew me away. Yeah, I realized as he's praying for these people who crucified him, that his death on the cross, if it was for them, that it was for me, that he loved me too. And I worshiped him. I said thank you to him. I just put my trust in his death on the cross for my sins, and I believed in his love for me. And it changed my life. I mean, he comes and he lives within you, and the person who I was, that selfish, unforgiving, just lying, stealing person, God began to change that in me and just produce his life in me. He gave me a reason to live. And I'm telling you, man, there is nothing that compares to just absorbing and learning about this crazy big love of God that he has for us. There's nothing that compares to having him and the power of who he is be just producing life in you as you learn how to walk with him and trust in him. And so I'm here today to just say, my God is awesome. He is real. He has powerfully changed me, and he has a crazy heart for you, for all of you who would believe and trust in what Jesus has done for you. He will save you from the consequence of your sin. He will come to live within you. He will transform your life. And I look forward to hearing about what he's done and maybe even how he might use this story. So comment, get back to me, ask a question, and just have a great day.